I'm going to now explain you a little bit more about the background of the summit itself, really paving the road for the coming 3 days. And I really want to start with some of the remarks what we heard about here, and really we heard from the ambassador about the rapid growth of the economy, which is a fact. So 7 out of the 10 fastest growing economies around the world are today in Africa, which is it's a massive success story in itself already, which is translating to really rapid growth of the emerging middle class all around this continent, which fundamentally becomes then the transformative force for the societies. At the same time, we see the massively rapid change of the ICT ecosystem itself. So we see the mobile penetration rate soaring, and if you look at the predictions what we had still a few years ago, actually the rates are faster than what we ever expected. So countries like Kenya, we had today reaching a level of about 75%. We have massive rapid growth in West Africa, Ghana, Nigeria. Ethiopia is picking up extremely fast. Mozambique, South Africa, of course, is extremely high. North Africa, Egypt, of course, all of the North African countries are basically covered already. So that transition has been massively fast. The challenge what we still have is that, do we have really enough locally relevant content and locally relevant services for the local population? The reality is that not quite yet enough. We have great success stories already, but I think that we need to be really focusing on how to build locally relevant content for the local population, particularly looking at the base of the economic pyramid as well. So I think that it's fundamental that that's one of the clear targets what we have for the summit. Also, if you look at now the past 18 months, we've seen that there's quite a few new innovation hubs popping up around the continent. So today we have about, if I'm not incorrect, about 22 hubs around the continent, plus many more different type of incubators and technology parks and so forth. But to put that into perspective, so if you look at the size of the continent, you remember that the African continent can eat in itself United States, Western Europe, China and India. All of those countries can be fitted, and European Union can be fitted into Africa. So meaning that if we really are talking about 22 innovation hubs on this continent, it's not quite enough. And it's going to be one of the topics what we're going to explore over the coming days as well. There's also a massive amount of new African innovations, and it's great to see in journals like Fortune and CNN publishing about Africa becoming a center of innovation and a source of innovation for the rest of the world. And we have great examples already over the past few years. Also, at the same time, we look at the policy frameworks, we look at the strategies and so forth that the governments have been putting up. I have to be saying, and coming from that background, having worked in African governments with the innovation policies, ICT policies, the situation is getting much better. They are more inclusive, they are more participative and so forth. But still, very often, we have a challenge that these papers just remain as papers. They are not executed in the real life. And sometimes when they're executed, they are not executed in collaboration with all the critical stakeholders. And that's really why we are here. So we have all the critical stakeholders here to get to today. And I really want you to build bridges, communicate with each other. Entrepreneurs, policymakers, really learn from each other. What are your challenges? And how can we make your the life a little bit easier? So I'm going to focus on few focus areas that what I really see fundamental and sort of explain a little bit also why the leadership is such an important topic. And one of them is already what I mentioned about is the scale itself. We cannot be happy with the scale what we have today. And why is scale so important? Scale is important because of the critical mass. And critical mass is basically important because then things become starting to be viral. If you go back to the theory of innovation diffusion, which starts from the innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards, which basically is a Gauss curve. It shows you that how innovation goes through a society. The interesting thing there is that typically things start changing when we reach a level of about 15 to 20%. That's the tipping point. That's a sweet point, a sweet point after which things become viral. And that's what we need to be after. So when we all work together, innovators, policymakers, financiers, academics, all of us, we need to be cultivating that spirit so that we can reach that critical mass in the society. One of the things that is required in this context is a bit of a paradigm shift. And when Thomas Kuhn in the 1960s was developing the theory of scientific revolution, he was really thinking about how can we actually shift people from one paradigm to the next. And paradigm can be described as kind of the dominant worldview, so the way that I see the world. And the challenge with the paradigms is that typically someone who has adopted a new paradigm, yes, can understand the past, but someone who is still in the past cannot really see the future. And one of the critical challenges what we have in our hands is that we need to be bridging and reaching out and really trying to learn from each other and talking to the younger generation, who of course automatically are in the new way of thinking already. So that's a challenge for me personally. It's a challenge for all of us here in the room. So really try to engage and try to discuss with your peers and especially the innovators. What really are their challenges? What is the worldview what they have in their heads, and how can we support them? I give you an example of the paradigm shift from my home country, Finland. When I was growing up in Finland in the 1980s, I have to be honest, entrepreneurs and innovators were very often seen as the pariah of the society. I even remember my mum telling me at the time that entrepreneurs, you know, these are just the guys who are just thinking about themselves. But that was 1980s. Then early 1990s, we had a very serious economic depression in Finland, and things started changing. And today, in 2012, if you go to any university in Finland and you ask the students, what is your dream job? They will tell you, startup company. It's no longer the large corporations of the world, but it's really they want to become entrepreneurs. And there's a massive change in the society itself. It's socially acceptable, and it's encouraged, it's aspired. And that's a really big change in the society itself. I also want to talk a little bit about the innovation environment, which is a fundamental concept as well. Richard Florida wrote a few years back a book about the rise of the creative class. And in that book, what basically Florida describes is an environment that stimulates innovation. Because sometimes the challenge what we have is that we build, yes, buildings, we set up organizations, yes, and we expect the innovations to just start happening. But unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. We need to create an enabling environment with the right type of talent, and then innovations start happening. And one of the challenges what I sometimes see is that we very often think that infrastructures and organizations themselves stimulate innovation. So we set up a technology park somewhere. But it doesn't necessarily create that needed disruption in the society, because you need to have the presence of the innovators. But not only the innovators, not only the engineers, but we need the artists, we need the singers, we need the dancers, we need the designers, we need the economists, policymakers, all of them. And then only things start happening. And the interesting thing about Florida's research was that he showed that actually many of the innovation hubs in the US were cities which were actually the homes of not critical, but let's say they were homes of music industry, of the creative class. So think about that as well. So we have to be really looking at it outside of the box, not just focus on the engineers, all right? Many of us are engineers, yes. But it's important to look at artists and designers all across, because that's your innovation ecosystem itself. Also, important element about building an organization, whether it's a private sector company or it's even a movement or any type of organization, governmental as well, is to think about why does that organization exist. And I was just watching, a few months back, I was watching a video by Simon Sinek, one of the TED videos. And he was describing his theory of 3 different types of organizations. He said that the largest groups of organizations fall into category that know what they are doing. They know exactly that they know, okay, they produce microphones or they produce pencils, but their core skill is in really sort of tangible skill of producing something. And large part of the organizations fall into that category. But the second group of organizations are then, which is much smaller already, but they know how they do what they do. So they are the masters of the processes, and they know how the supply chain works, they know how the manufacturing process itself works, and they are the domain experts in that sense. So there's much fewer organizations in that space. But the third category, which is the most important one, is the organizations, movements, companies who know why they do what they do. They have a vision, they have a mission, and they can communicate that to everyone around them. So people become part of that. And that is critical for any innovation system as well. Because the innovation system, if it's not aligned, if there's no story, if there's no vision, it doesn't know where it's going. And that's why it once again requires that everyone comes together. And Mr. Sinek uses a great example of a great oratory, Martin Luther King, in his presentation. And he says that there was a very special reason why Mr. King, was saying, I have a dream, instead of I have a plan. Because plan is about what? Dream is about vision. It's about a story that brings people on board. And that really is the reason why we are talking about leadership today. And which shows the leadership for innovation be the central theme, which is cross-cutting all of the four streams what we have here today. And leadership is the fundamental instrument for transforming societies and for building innovation systems and innovative societies, creativity and so forth. It's the same thing for policymakers, it's the same thing for private sector, all of the critical stakeholders. And in Africa we have a great legacy actually of leadership. Largely because of external influence and so forth. We have lost maybe some of those essential cultural heritages what we had. But concepts like Umuntu, Isintu, Ubuntu and so forth really resonate well in this time as well. And when you think about that participative approach, what these cultural, let's say, philosophies include, it's all about open innovation. It's about really working together. It's about sharing your thoughts. It's about caring about the one and the other. It's about solidarity and really working together. I was listening to another actually speech of Martin Luther King from 1957. And that speech, what he made was about, it was actually to his congruency. And it was about his participation in the inauguration of Kwame Nkrumah in Accra. And the way that he told the story, he portrayed African people in the 1957 as the inspiration for the entire civil rights movement in the United States. So he saw African continent as the source of inspiration for the social change and the transformation of one of the greatest nations on earth. So I think that it's once again a great testimony of the leadership skills and the capacities what we have. But I'm not going to talk more about this topic because we have great speakers here who are real domain experts. So I think that they will share their thoughts and wisdom over the coming few days. I'm committed and sure that over the next 3 days we have beautiful opportunities to engage and also not just in our own respective streams, but also beyond the streams themselves. But okay, if I think about myself now, what really are the objectives, what I would like to see us taking away in the end of the day 3? The first one for me really is that we all of us challenge ourselves. So we really go outside of the box and really recognize that I don't actually know everything. Okay, there's something what I can learn from my peers and from my friends and colleagues. The second one is that we would really end up in the end of the day 3 with tangible, concrete ideas and projects we can then take away and run with. And the beauty actually of the approach what we are cultivating now here is that really you are the stars of this event. You are the ones who actually take ownership of many of the ideas and initiatives what we built here. So it's very different in that sense. And I would wish that each of you, when you leave in the end of the day 3, that you have built at least 2 or 3 or 4 new partnerships and build networks around you so that you can then explore and build these partnerships later on after the summit has ended. But one of the things what we also want to do now is that this year to do the follow-up much better. So we are going to establish on the network, we are also establishing a platform where we can also monitor how these different initiatives are going. But okay, now it's time to move forward. I know that these plenary sessions are always a bit boring, so we have to get a bit of the energy in.